Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Well, you've just hired a new employee. They seemed to be a great fit during the hiring process. Their resume looked good, they presented well, and they ticked all the right boxes. But they're just not performing like you expected. What can you do? Well, you need to be fair. You need to follow a process, and you've got to give them a chance to improve. That's according to workplace expert Michelle Gibbings. She's been advising businesses for decades now on how to manage new hires. For one, creating a hiring plan to protect you and new employees from heartache is key, and something she discusses more a bit later on. But first, when does a boss realise that they may have made a hiring mistake? Michelle explains to Chris Ashmore.
Sometimes this can happen really quickly and sometimes perhaps it can be a little bit slower. But often it's when, you've hired someone and you're just seeing that they're not picking up the elements of the job fast enough. Or you've got this sense of, here's all the elements that I thought they should be able to do. This is what they told me in the interview that they could do, and they're really struggling to get the work done. Or that they're not interested in the work and in working out how to actually make that work. Or thirdly, you're seeing that there's a disconnect between them and how they're working with the rest of the team. And so from a, that sort of cultural perspective in terms of how the team is engaging and connecting, you're starting to worry, from a cultural fit, is this really working?
What is a boss to do then? Is there a process to follow?
The first thing is to really sit down and acknowledge the situation. And you want to recognise, look, you might have made a wrong hire. And you want to dig into that to go, okay, if I think I've made the wrong hire, what's the evidence or the data that you've actually got to back that up? But you also need to be fair to the person involved, and you want to have a conversation with them to actually understand, is it that perhaps you haven't been clear about what it is that you've wanted? Have you hired someone and there's been a disconnect between the role they thought they were applying for and what it is you thought that you were getting? So through all of this, it's really important. Work through the role that you've played in getting to this situation, and then sit down with the person that you've hired so that you can really understand where they're at. And is there therefore a gap between what it is that you need them to be able to deliver and what it is that they can deliver? That's the first step, to actually work out what that gap is, because once you know what that gap is, you can then work through, what do you do about it?
So once you've identified the gap, where to from there?
You then want to work out, are there ways to close that gap? So is it that you need to spend more time with them, coaching them? Is it that they might need capability uplift? Is it that you need to spend more time helping them embed and connect with the team or their stakeholders or their clients, depending on the context in which they're working? So you need to look at what options you've got. So is it sort of capability uplift and team dynamics that you need to work on? Or is it perhaps that they could be better suited to another role in the organisation? So you need to do that first, because once you've got that sense of options, you can then work through, okay, got some options. Now I can have a conversation with the employee around those potential options and look to go, okay, if we can get agreement around those options and how we progress, then you can execute on it.
So writing these things down, writing the plan down is important.
I think it's really important to write it down so that you're really clear about what you want to do, because it's really easy to go, I've made a wrong hire, they're still under probation, maybe I just get rid of them. And that's not necessarily fair, because, well, what role have you played in this? Have you been really clear about your expectations? Have you spent enough time with them in terms of helping them get into the role and the rhythm of the role and the rhythm of the organisation? Like, have you actually fairly given them enough time to show what they're capable of? And so if you write the plan down, then what you can do is sit down with them and get them to agree to it. To go, yep, I'm comfortable. This is the part as the employee, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to be able to demonstrate to you over that particular time that I can do. So I do come from the sort of philosophy that it's really expensive to hire. It's also really expensive to keep people in a role if they're not effective. So, but you want to make sure that you've done everything you can do to help that person upskill and be successful in the role. But you also need to get to the point where you go, I know what my options are if it's not working, and I'm really clear it's never going to actually be able to shift and change. And that's the exit strategy. So you need to actually understand what those options are from an exit perspective as well.
Most new employees are on probation, whether it's 3 months or whatever. That would make it easier to let them go if they're not what you envisaged, right?
Yeah, and look, and sometimes, a lot of organisations these days even have 6 months probation. And it is because, there are terms and conditions and, yes, you can let them go. But I also think it's really important. You do still need to be fair. Often you still need to follow a process, and you need to give them notice that they haven't been successful. And whilst, there'd be different interpretations from a legal perspective as to whether the person could challenge if they were let go during their probationary period, I also think from a cultural perspective in an organisation, it's really important to treat people with dignity and respect. And, if someone hasn't met the mark, but you've never told them they haven't met the mark, and then on the day that their probation is about to come up, you say, hey, we're letting you go. I just think that's not a nice thing to do to someone. And I really think it's important as employers, people talk. This goes to your brand and your reputation and the culture. It also shows other people in the organisation how you treat people. And that's really important. And so I always say, put yourself into that person's shoes. And is that how you would want to be treated?
That's terrific. And I suppose in summary, it's important then to ensure your hiring process is adequate.
Oh, look, absolutely. And it's interesting. Often what I see with leaders and employers, and particularly, they're really busy and they're juggling 20 million things at once, and they're trying to work out where they spend their time, and they think, I might just outsource this, get someone else to do it. And they're not involved enough in the process. And you think about it, the people that work with you, they're your organisation in so many respects. And so devote the time. If it hasn't worked out, don't kick yourself because, we've all been there. We've all done hires that haven't worked, and I've certainly been there. But what are you learning from it? What is it that you needed to perhaps do differently? What would you shift and change in the process? Because you want to learn from it so that you don't make the same mistakes next time.
That was workplace expert Michelle Gibbings. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.